They tell you to be careful what you wish for. My parents wished for a genius to fix my grades. I wished for a way out of this suffocating, perfect life. We both got what we wanted. But not in the way anyone expected. My name is Elena. And if you saw me in the halls of my prep school, you'd see a girl with a 4.2 GPA and a clear path to the Ivy League. But right now, my textbooks are scattered across the floor of my bedroom. The door is locked. And Leo, the man my father hired to be my academic savior, is standing so close to me that I can feel the heat of his breath against my temple. He isn't looking at my calculus homework. He's looking at me like he's finally decided to stop being a professional. Outside, my parents' car is pulling into the driveway. The headlights are sweeping across my bedroom wall. We have exactly 60 seconds before they walk through the front door. 60 seconds to decide if we stop or if we change our lives forever. Stay with me. Because to understand how I ended up on this desk, in the dark, with a man who could ruin everything, you have to hear what happened during the storm that changed the definition of extra credit forever. Dear listeners, before I began telling this complicated story of my life, I ask you to support my channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and write the comment which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. Navigating a world designed by my parents to be flawless, but which, to me, felt suffocatingly empty. I had everything money could buy, except for one thing. A space to breathe. To simply be. And then there was math. Calculus wasn't just numbers to me. It was a wall I couldn't climb. A language I couldn't speak fluently. My father, a man whose empire was built on precision, didn't see a daughter struggling. He saw a potential blemish on a meticulously planned resume. He saw a threat to the family's flawless narrative. An inefficiency. So, he did what he always did. He outsourced the problem. He hired Leo. He's a PhD candidate at the university, my mother had said, her tone implying this was a solution, not a new complication. Brilliant, dedicated, and he comes, highly recommended. Your father insists he's the best to get you through this last hurdle. I remember that day with a clarity that still makes my breath hitch, the dull ache of expectation in my chest, the scent of lemon polish and old money that usually clung to our grand foyer. But when Leo stepped inside, the air shifted. He brought with him the scent of the outside world, a hint of rain, damp earth, and something subtly masculine, like old books and expensive cologne. It was a scent that didn't belong in our sterile home, and it was intoxicating. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him a little too well for a grad student. His dark hair was impeccably styled, but a few stray strands fell across his forehead, hinting at a hidden wildness. He had silver-rimmed glasses that made his eyes, the color of warm whiskey, seem intensely focused. He didn't look like a teacher. He looked like a secret I was about to uncover. Our lessons took place in my bedroom. At the sprawling mahogany desk my mother had meticulously chosen, it was an antique, heavy, and imposing, making the already large room feel strangely cramped. Leo sat so close that I could feel the residual heat radiating from his shoulder, a constant, low thrum against my own skin. Elena. Focused, he'd say, his voice a low, smooth rumble, like dark chocolate melting on the tongue, bitter, rich, and utterly captivating. It wasn't a reprimand. It was a challenge, and every time he spoke my name, it felt less like an instruction, and more like an intimate whisper. I'd stare at the complex equations on the paper, but I wasn't seeing derivatives or all I could see was the subtle movement of his Adam's apple when he swallowed. The way the tiny hairs on his wrist disappeared, beneath the cuff of his pristine, white shirt. I was counting the seconds between his breaths, measuring the distance between our knees, which, in that confined space, felt impossibly close. Every instinct screamed danger, but another part of me, a part one hadn't known existed, leaned in. He had long, steady fingers, which he used to tap a fountain pen against the page. A soft click, 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 that echoed in the heavy silence. He held that pen with a grip that was almost too firm, like he was barely restraining a hidden strength. Every time he leaned over to circle a mistake, his sleeve would brush against my arm, or his breath would ghost over my temple. A tiny spark, like static electricity, would jump between us, and I'd flinch. Just a fraction. He'd look at me then, his whiskey-colored eyes tracking the movement of my throat when I swallowed. A slow, deliberate gaze that saw everything and betrayed nothing. He knew I wasn't thinking about math. And the terrifying part was, I suspected he wasn't entirely focused on it either. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of controlled tension. Our lessons became less about calculus and more about the unspoken language that grew between us. I started subtly, almost unconsciously, testing the boundaries. My hand would linger a second too long when reaching for the same pencil. My chair would accidentally bump his. I'd drop my pen, bending low, allowing my hair to brush his knee, or giving him a glimpse of skin I knew he shouldn't see. He never acknowledged these small transgressions verbally. Instead, his reactions were subtle, almost imperceptible. A tightening of his jawline, a longer pause before he spoke, as if collecting his thoughts from a place he didn't want me to access. Sometimes, his breathing would become just a fraction deeper. These tiny cues were like breadcrumbs in a dark forest, confirming that I wasn't imagining the current that coursed between us. I started choosing my outfits for our sessions with meticulous care. Shorter skirts, a silk blouse worn slightly unbuttoned, even though the room was always kept at that cool, clinical 68 degrees. I'd justify it to myself, claiming the material was more comfortable for long study hours. But I knew the truth. I wanted to see his eyes linger, to feel the heat of his gaze. I wanted to feel powerful in a house where I usually felt utterly powerless. One afternoon, I pretended to be utterly lost on a complex equation. I leaned back in my chair, stretching, letting my blouse pull taut across my chest. I just can't get this, Leo. I sighed, my voice softer than usual. He leaned forward, his arm bracing against the desk, bringing his face dangerously close to mine. I could see the tiny flecks of gold in his eyes. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my lips, then to the slight curve of my collarbone. For a split second, the math textbook vanished from our reality. It was just us, suspended in that illicit space. My parents' social calendar was as packed as a presidential itinerary. Dinners, galas, charity events. It meant more and more evenings where Leo and I were left alone in the sprawling house, the quiet stretching out around us, amplifying every creak, every sigh. These late-night sessions became our secret. One particular evening, a sudden, violent thunderstorm began to roll in, the kind that makes the sky look bruised and angry. The first drops hammered against my window pane, a rhythmic, hypnotic sound that seemed to sync with my pulse. My parents had called, stuck at a gala downtown, delayed by flash flooding. We were completely alone. The house, usually so grand, felt suddenly massive, empty, and strangely vulnerable. The power flickered once, twice, and then, with a soft thunk, died completely. The desk lamp failed, plunging us into a heavy twilight lit only by the sporadic, eerie flashes of lightning outside. Leo didn't move. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't curse the outage. He just sat there, a silhouette in the shifting shadows, his gaze fixed on me. "It's too dark to see the books," I whispered, my voice thin and breathless in the sudden silence. The air hummed with unspoken things. "Then stop looking at them," he replied. His voice was a low growl now, no longer the smooth chocolate, but something darker, more primal. I heard the subtle creak of his chair as he pushed back, standing up. I heard his footsteps slow, deliberate, each sound amplified in the darkness as he walked toward the door. Every fiber of my being screamed, "He's leaving. He's going to maintain his professionalism." But then, I heard it, the soft, unmistakable click of the lock. It wasn't just a lock. It was a permission slip, an invitation, an undeniable acknowledgement of the secret we had been cultivating in the sterile air of my room. When he turned back to me, the lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his face. His glasses were gone, placed carefully on the desk. His eyes, dark and hungry, were focused entirely on me, reflecting the blue-white light of the storm. "I think," he said, his voice barely a whisper above the drumming rain, "that we've spent enough time on the curriculum for tonight." The air crackled with more than just static electricity from the storm. It was toll electricity of pure, unadulterated tension. Leo didn't move towards me, not immediately. He just stood there, by the now locked door, watching me, and I, mesmerized, watched him. "Elena," he finally said, his voice raspy. "You're doing it on purpose now, aren't you?" My breath hitched. He wasn't accusing me. He was acknowledging me. He saw through my carefully constructed facade of a struggling student, and in that moment, I felt utterly exposed, yet strangely exhilarated. "Doing what?" I managed, my voice a shaky whisper. "Pretending to struggle, wearing those clothes, giving me those looks." He paused, the word "looks" hanging in the charged air, heavier than any mathematical equation. "You want me to break the rules, don't you?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My parents' voices, their expectations, their rules, they all vanished. All that existed was Leo, framed by the storm-lashed window, and the raw, undeniable desire pulsing between us. "Maybe," I confessed, my voice barely audible, "maybe I do." He walked back to the desk, not sitting, but leaning against it, his strong hands flat on the polished mahogany. "It's impossible, Elena. I'm your tutor. You're underage. Your parents." He trailed off, but his eyes, those intense, whiskey-colored eyes, never left mine. They were filled with a conflict that mirrored my own. Suddenly, the jarring ring of the house phone shattered the moment. It cut through the tension like a knife. We both froze. My parents, they must have finally made it home. Leo looked at the phone, then at me, a flicker of raw frustration in his gaze. The ringing continued, piercing and relentless. He glanced at his watch, a quick, almost imperceptible movement. "They're calling the landline," he murmured, his voice tight. "They must be worried about the storm." He moved, then, quickly, efficiently, unlocking the door and pulling it open a crack, just enough to show me he was leaving. "I have to go, Elena. Your parents will be home any minute. I'll call them later to check in." He gave me one last, searing look, a look that promised this wasn't over. The moment had been broken, but not erased. The blue-bowling tension was unbearable, leaving me breathless and aching with unfulfilled anticipation. The next week was agony. Every day felt like a year. Leo had called my parents, reassuring them I was making excellent progress despite this storm. He'd even rescheduled our next session, pushing it back 2 days, ostensibly to give me time to catch up. I knew better. He was building the anticipation, making the wait unbearable, and it worked. Every passing hour, every text from my parents about their trivial concerns, only sharpened my hunger for his presence. When he finally returned, the air in my room was heavy with the weight of unspoken things. He didn't mention the storm. I didn't mention the lock. We both pretended to open our textbooks, but our eyes met across the vast expanse of the mahogany desk, a silent, knowing acknowledgement. My parents were due home in exactly 2 hours. They had a charity auction to attend, a grand affair that would keep them out until past midnight. I knew this because I had accidentally overheard their conversation, and Leo, with a subtle glance at his own expensive watch, seemed to know it too. He started the lesson as usual, his voice a low monotone, explaining a particularly complex problem, but his gaze kept flicking to mine, a silent question. My heart was pounding, a wild drumbeat in my chest. I knew what he was asking. I knew what I wanted. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I just can't focus. Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My mind is completely blank. He closed his textbook, slowly, deliberately. The sound was stark in the silent room. He stood up, and for a second, I thought he was going to walk away, to keep his distance, but instead, his eyes, dark and resolute, locked onto mine. He walked over to the door, his footsteps soft but purposeful on the carpet. He reached for the knob. My breath caught in my throat. He turned it. The soft click of the lock echoed in the silent room. A sound that, this time, was not a question, but a definite answer. My parents' rules, the Ivy League, my perfect future, all of it dissolved into a all that mattered was the electric anticipation building between us. He walked back to the desk, his gaze never leaving mine. A slow, predatory walk that made my stomach clench, with a mixture of fear and pure, unadulterated excitement. Without a word, without breaking eye contact, he swept my heavy calculus textbooks off the desk with one powerful, decisive hand. They hit the expensive Persian rug with a loud thud, the sound shockingly loud in the sudden, complete silence. We aren't looking at the books today, he said, his voice a low growl, raw with desire. He reached for my hand, his fingers strong and warm, pulling me gently from my chair. Then, with a fluid motion that took my breath away, he lifted me onto the desk, the cool, polished mahogany pressing against my legs. The room spun. The forbidden nature of it all, the adrenaline of my parents being away, the sheer audacity of what was happening. It was intoxicating. Everything happened so fast, a blur of intense sensations, desperate and exhilarating. We lost all track of time, lost in a world that existed only within the confines of that locked room. The shrill, unexpected ring of the landline phone shattered the spell. We both froze, our bodies still tangled, our breaths ragged. My parents. They were calling. They must be on their way home. A frantic, desperate scramble ensued. Clothes were hastily straightened. Hair was smoothed. The textbooks were shelved back onto the desk, though not quite in their original neat stack. The air still thrummed with the aftermath, thick with the scent of perfume, and something else, something raw and primal, that no amount of air freshener could erase. Just as the faint crunch of tires on our gravel driveway reached my ears, Leo, somehow, managed to compose himself. He ran a hand through his hair, adjusted his tie, and miraculously looked like the calm, collected Tutor who had walked in 2 hours prior. He picked up his briefcase, giving me one last, lingering look, a look that held 1,000 unspoken promises. My parents walked into the kitchen, their voices bright with the excitement of the auction. "Leo, my dear boy," my father boomed, completely oblivious. "Still working hard, even with the storm." He clapped Leo on the shoulder. Leo smiled, a perfect, professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Always a pleasure, Mr. Henderson. Elena is making excellent progress." My mother, bustling, gave me a quick, distracted kiss on the cheek. "Did you finish all your work, darling?" she asked, already moving to recount the evening's events. "Yes, mother," I replied, my voice steady, despite the earthquake rumbling beneath my skin. Leo was a great help. If only they knew that while they were at their opulent auction, completely absorbed in their world of status and acquisitions, their perfect tutor had taught me a lesson I'd never forget, a lesson that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with a hunger I hadn't known I possessed. Leo left with a polite nod and a promise to reschedule for next week. I watched him go, a shiver running through me, and as I stared at the messy stack of calculus books on my desk, a slow, knowing smile spread across my face. I knew exactly what I had to do. I found my next assignment, a crucial problem set that would determine my grade for the next month, and then, with a quiet, deliberate resolve, I made sure I got every single answer wrong. I had to ensure he had a reason to keep coming back. After all, the real lessons had only just begun.